When you're working as a cybersecurity professional, it's essential that you know how cybersecurity frameworks work. And in this video, we're going to break down one of the most important, which is the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. So without further ado, let's dig in. So this is going to be focused on the quick start guide. This is just going to be an introduction to the cybersecurity framework, and then we're going to break it down further in each individual area, and they're all going to be separate videos. So stay tuned for more as we dive deeper into each area here. But these are a great breakdown of how we can go ahead and break down our different controls in cybersecurity into areas that we need to focus on. The first thing that we have to address is what even is a framework in cybersecurity? Well, a framework is essentially just a set of guidelines that help us to guide which way to take our organization in cybersecurity. And it helps us to understand how we can basically take cybersecurity and make it easier to understand and break it down into bite-sized pieces and give us really a step-by-step guidebook every single time we have something that we need to look at in our environment. So it really is useful for that, and it sort of acts as just a guide. Let's start off with identify. So according to NIST, identify is whenever you develop an organizational understanding to manage cybersecurity risk to systems, assets, data, and capabilities. And they break this down further in their quick start guide by saying that you are going to identify critical enterprise processes and assets. So what are your enterprise's activities that absolutely must continue in order to be viable? An example they give is that it could be maintaining a website to retrieve payments, protecting customer or patient information securely, or ensuring that the information your enterprise collects remains accessible and accurate. My example here would be if I'm working on a critical system and I have something really important that I need to safeguard, that would be something that I want to identify. If I'm working for a bank, I want to identify anything that has financial information and I want to protect that. So figuring out what your assets are, that's important. The next area is to document your information flows. It's important to not only understand what type of information your enterprise collects and uses, but also to understand where the data is located and how it is used, especially where contracts and external partners are engaged. So definitely useful there. Documentation is something that you'll hear me say a lot in the videos that I make. Document everything. It's very important. The next thing is maintain hardware and software inventory. And so it's important to have an understanding of the computers and software in your enterprise because these are frequently the entry points of malicious actors. This inventory could be as simple as a spreadsheet, or it could be as complex as a database. Something that will help you to keep track of your inventory is extremely helpful. An example I'll give is in the event of Log4j. When Log4j happened, we typically in the cybersecurity industry, we were trying to make sure that anything that had Log4j was taken care of. And so anything that we didn't know that would have had Log4j was a considerable risk to an environment. So making sure that you're keeping good track of your inventory will help you out in the long run when it comes to mitigating risks. The next is establish policies for cybersecurity that include rules and responsibilities. These policies and procedures should clearly describe your expectations for how cybersecurity activities will protect your information and systems and how they support critical enterprise processes. Cybersecurity policies should be integrated with other enterprise risk considerations, in other words, financial or reputational. So establishing policies for cybersecurity that include rules and responsibilities. This is really important. Making sure that you have good guidelines, good policies in place makes it easier on everybody to understand what your expectations are from a cybersecurity perspective. And then lastly, under identify is identify threats, vulnerabilities, and risks to assets. Ensure that your risk management processes are established and managed to ensure internal and external threats are identified, assessed, and documented in risk registers. Ensure risk responses are identified and prioritized, executed, and results monitored. Certainly important stuff. So identify, in a nutshell, is to make sure that you have an understanding of all the different systems and everything that you have in your environment that you need to protect. Extremely important. You can't really get very far if you don't identify all of your assets and important information. The next area is protect. So NIST says to develop and implement the appropriate safeguards to ensure delivery of services. So you want to manage access to your assets and information. They say create unique accounts for each employee and ensure that users only have access to information, computers, and applications that are needed for their jobs. Authenticate users using passwords and multi factor techniques before they are granted access to information, computers, and applications. Tightly manage and track physical access to devices. So, in other words, you just want to put blockades in place so that way only people have a need to know. Keyword need to know. If they need to know the information that they're looking at, they can access that information. If they don't need to know, you don't have them look at it. And so that comes back to the original point I made in the first video I ever made, which is the CIA triad. You want them to have confidentiality, integrity, and availability. They need to have their data available, but it needs to stay confidential. The next is to protect sensitive data. If your enterprise stores or transmits sensitive data, make sure that this data is protected by encryption, both while it's stored on computers as well as when it's transmitted to other parties. Consider utilizing integrity checking to ensure only approved changes to the data have been made. Securely delete and/or destroy data when it's no longer needed or required for compliance purposes. Absolutely important stuff, because if we don't protect our sensitive data, anybody could get their hands on it. And this comes to the classified piece of the CIA triad and why it's so important to go ahead and consider that piece whenever you're working with any type of data. The next is to conduct regular backups. Many operating systems have built-in backup capabilities. Software and cloud solutions are also available that can automate the backup process. A good practice is to keep one frequently backed up set of data offline to protect it against ransomware. Yeah, I would say if you're not using the cloud in 2023, you should absolutely start. There's absolutely a reason why, if you're working maybe in government sector, you would want to have things on-prem, backed up on-prem. But for the most part, there's no reason why you shouldn't have some type of cloud storage, because if something happens to your site in a disaster, you need to make sure that everything can be backed up so that way you can continue business. Absolutely, crucially important. Protect your devices. Consider installing host-based firewalls and other protections such as endpoint security products. Apply uniform configurations to devices and control changes to device configurations. Disable device services or features that are not necessary to support mission functions. Ensure that there is a policy and that devices are disposed of securely. The next is manage device vulnerabilities. Regularly update both the operating system and applications that are installed on your computers and other devices to protect them from attack. If possible, enable automatic updates. Consider using software tools to scan devices for additional vulnerabilities. Remediate vulnerabilities with high likelihood and/or impact. Definitely consider vulnerabilities a huge part of your career as a cybersecurity professional, because vulnerabilities are kind of our bread and butter in cybersecurity. Get familiar with them, know what a CVE is, and know how to mitigate any type of vulnerabilities that exist in your environment. Extremely important to protecting your environment. And lastly is to train users. Regularly train and retrain all your users to be sure that they are aware of enterprise cybersecurity policies and procedures and their specific rules and responsibilities as a condition of employment. Training and educating users is extremely important, and if you don't do it, you should be doing it, because if you're only as strong as your weakest link. If you don't train your users, how can you expect them to comply with what you consider important if they don't even know it's important? So, absolutely crucially important. And that wraps up protect. And protect in a nutshell is essentially to make sure that your data inside of your systems and anything that resides in there that you take and want to see protected is protected. Anything that you have in there that is important to your business is protected at all times. The next area is detect. Detect is defined as develop and implement the appropriate activities to identify the occurrence of a cybersecurity event. So what we want to do here is we start off with testing and updating detection processes. Develop and test processes and procedures for detecting unauthorized entities and actions on the network. environment that you're not typically seeing any kind of anomalous data, any type of anomalous activity. Those are the types of things you want to be on the lookout for. And so you need to have that detect capability built into your systems. Snort is a good one for that. IDS and IPS, intrusion detection and intrusion prevention, are very important for this. Absolutely super crucial for when it comes to detecting any type of irregularities in your environment. And maintain and monitor logs. Logs are crucial in order to identify anomalies in your enterprise's computers and applications. These logs record events such as changes to systems or accounts, as well as the initiation of communication channels. Consider using software tools that can aggregate these logs and look for patterns or anomalies from expected network behavior. One thing that comes to mind for this one for me is Splunk. Splunk's a leader in this space, and I'm not endorsing their product necessarily. I'm not paid to endorse their product, but I definitely do think that their product is amazing. This is not a paid advertisement, but I think that Splunk is probably the leader in this space. So if you're looking for a good way to monitor and maintain your logs, Splunk is definitely a good solution for you. However, there are many other players in this space, so definitely if you can't afford Splunk, keep your eyes peeled and look for other solutions that are also very good. The next area is know the expected data flows for your enterprise. If you know what and how your data is expected to be used for your enterprise, you are much more likely to notice when the unexpected happens, and unexpected is never a good thing when it comes to cybersecurity. Unexpected data flows might include customer information being exported from an internal database and exiting the network. If you have contracted work to a cloud or managed service provider, discuss with them how they track data flows and reports, including unexpected events. So absolutely crucial to know how your data is being used and how it normally flows from point A to point B. Things like data loss prevention are very important for this, and I recommend getting a reputable DLP provider, somebody out there. Use Gartner and use G2 and check out, different websites to see what has the best at the time that you're watching this video. There's different things out there. Microsoft sensitivity labels are a good way to understand your data flows, and there's lots of different good solutions out there. So definitely recommend checking into that. Understand the impact of your cybersecurity events. If a cybersecurity event is detected, your enterprise should work quickly and thoroughly to understand the breadth and depth of the impact. Seek help. Communicating information on the event with appropriate stakeholders will help keep you in good stead in terms of partners, oversight bodies, and other, potentially including investors, and improve policies and processes. So it's very important that you understand how big the thing is that you're dealing with if you do detect something that is going wrong, because that will determine who needs to be pulled in. Understand and build out a proper risk plan, a proper business continuity plan, and a proper disaster recovery plan. You definitely want to have those things. You definitely want to have a disaster recovery plan, a business continuity plan in place, and so that way you can understand what needs to happen if something goes sideways. The next key area in the cybersecurity framework is respond, and that is defined as develop and implement the appropriate activities to take action regarding a detected cybersecurity event. So you want to ensure response plans are tested. It's even more important to test response plans to make sure each person knows their responsibilities in executing the plan. The better prepared your organization is, the more effective the response is likely to be. This includes knowing any legal reporting requirements or required information sharing. So this goes back to what I was just saying a minute ago when it comes to the concept of a business continuity and a disaster recovery plan. You want to make sure that you can respond and that you're testing these things out, because the way you practice is the way you perform. If you don't test things out, then you are not going to see success in the end. And credit to my old karate instructor for that, how you practice is how you perform quote. That it comes from him. The next thing is ensure response plans are updated. Testing the plan and execution during an incident inevitably will reveal needed improvements. Be sure to update response plans with lessons learned. So in other words, if you notice something's missing whenever you're actually dealing with a problem, make sure that you're updating that and make sure you're making it even better every single time something goes wrong, because it's only going to help you and your business go ahead and be stronger in the long run. Coordinate with internal and external stakeholders. It's important to make sure that your enterprise's response plans and updates include all key stakeholders and external service providers. They can contribute to improvements in planning and execution. In other words, if you use AWS for your cloud environment, make sure you're including them so that way you can understand how they can help you. If you are dealing with a major ransomware incident, make sure that you're pulling in resources like the FBI. They can help you out dramatically in a situation like that. Don't be afraid to reach out to those government organizations and seek help whenever it comes to this type of situation. They are hugely helpful, and they will help get your business back up and running as best as they can. They want to see you succeed. And lastly, the next important point is recover. Develop and implement the appropriate activities to maintain plans for resilience and to restore any capabilities or services that were impaired due to a cybersecurity event. Communicate with internal and external stakeholders. Part of recovery depends upon effective communication. Your recovery plans need to carefully account for what, how, and when information will be shared with various stakeholders so that all interested parties receive the information they need, but no inappropriate information is shared. So make sure that you're using that need to know guideline. Make sure that you're giving everybody who needs to know about what happened and everything that has been taking place, and making sure that the business is back up and recovered and business is going on as normal, knows that everything's back to normal. Make sure that your recovery plans are updated. As with response plans, testing execution will improve employee and partner awareness and highlight areas for improvement. Be sure to update recovery plans with lessons learned. Again, it's really important to document everything that you do, every lesson you learn, because it will only help your business succeed. And that's really what the mission of cybersecurity is. Our mission is to protect data so that the business can succeed, so that they can go ahead and do the thing that they need to do to better improve our society. Our job is to keep them safe. Manage public relations and company reputation. One of the key aspects of recovery is managing the enterprise's reputation. When developing a recovery plan, consider how you will manage public relations so that your information sharing is accurate, complete, and timely, and not reactionary. So this might fall out of your jurisdiction a little bit as a cybersecurity professional, but just make sure that you communicate this with your leadership. Make sure that they are aware that public relations and making sure that your company reputation is mentioned whenever you give these types of disaster recovery planning talks with your leadership and management. Super important because it will help them. It will show them that you care very much about their business and show that you're truly an asset to them. So those are the 5 key areas for the NIST Cybersecurity Framework in a nutshell. Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. If you follow those guidelines, you will have a great cybersecurity program at your workplace. If you're doing an interview, you want to show the interviewer that you really know your stuff, mention these things during the interview. It will help you out in your chances to be able to get the job, because it will show them that you understand the steps needed in order to see cybersecurity done in the real world and not just through textbook. Because this is really the kinds of steps we take whenever we're working with a cybersecurity problem in the real world. So thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Take care.